Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my 2025 Avatar Year in Review video. This will be the second of the 3 end of year videos I always do on the channel. The first you'll have already seen already is the 2026 preview video. That has been up for a couple of days at this point. The third is the top story moments from the year. The kind of countdown video. That one will have to wait until the very early days of 2026. A lot of Awakening of Roku coverage to do in the last few days of the year here, so that one will just have to wait a little bit. But yes, just before we get into the 2025 year in review for Avatar, I do want to mention that I do have YouTube channel membership enabled on the channel if you would like to help support the channel. It is completely optional, but it is also very helpful for the channel. There are 2 tiers available, the lower Light Spirit tier and the higher Avatar tier. The first tier is mostly a kind of support tier, whereas the second tier, the main kind of benefit you get is that you do gain access to some exclusive videos I put up each year on the channel. Usually it is 1 video a month, in that, for instance, coming in the next day or 2 will be this month's exclusive video, which is going to be a Fortnite video of me playing some of the Bleach skins in the kind of Bleach Blitz mode, but also some Battle Royale stuff as well. So that video plus a bunch of others will be available to you if you join at that tier, but I just wanted to mention that that is an option. Otherwise, we'll jump straight into the video. So of course we start with Avatar Studios, and we have to start with the delay, because this is the thing that ultimately changed our perception of the year. When I did my preview for 2025, I really leaned into the idea that 2025 is going to be the year. Because the movie is so early in 2026, we have to get the full marketing campaign basically this year. We have to go this year. We can't delay it again. And unfortunately, that's exactly kind of what's happened. Because we have had the delay from January 30th to October 9th, we don't get basically any of the marketing campaign for the Aang movie. We still haven't properly started. You can maybe make an argument that the theatrical switch move, the description for the movie being revealed a few days ago, was somewhat of a start. But to me, no visual kind of means that you haven't properly started yet, ultimately. But either way, the idea is that we went from being in a situation where we would have had the trailer, we would have had tons of visuals, we'd know exactly what we're doing weeks away from the release of this movie in late January, to all of a sudden, we don't really even entirely know what exactly things are going to be like next year for Avatar. That's a pretty bad situation to be in as we end the year. Going from being kind of quite hopeful for the year to being like, yikes, what are they doing? And that's never a good position to be in. Now, when it comes to this delay, I think the important thing to realize is that this is not a delay that they made on a whim. They didn't want, I think, this to be the delay. I think very clearly everything points to the fact they really wanted to hit January 30th or maybe February as the release of this movie. One, they, I think, really wanted it to be in or around much closer to the actual anniversary year than they are going to have now. And you can tell that so much stuff has had to kind of shift this year because there's now this vacuum of like, we can't really talk about the movie yet because it's too early. And you can see probably merchandise makers having to pull everything back, will build up when the Aang movie is actually coming out. You can especially see it with some of the publishing stuff in the year, where clearly books were announced for the build up to January 30th. They've now been pushed into relatively late-ish next year for the build up to where the movie kind of now is expected to be. And all of these points, like even the Jazwares toy line, I think you can tell they kind of timed it a little bit differently than was maybe originally planned, because the movie was pushed back and they're likely to have movie merch. So just the big marketing machine that is there kind of almost like lying in wait for the movie, they didn't want to have to delay everything, but they had to. I think the only context we have for this is that I think some like Animation Insider magazines did point out that like it is somewhat of an animation kind of production delay. They needed the time to make the movie on time at the quality level that they wanted. So, you know, these things happen. This is even though we've had multiple delays technically, this feels like the first time it's like a proper like we didn't want to delay this, but we kind of have to, just for the sake of things working out well. So it is frustrating, but at least we, I think, have some sense for like, well, I guess it was needed. I guess it was required. The problem is, of course, more recent news puts some of this up in the air, but we will kind of get to it. We did get some news on the Aang movie this year. We learned that Steven Yeun is voicing adult Zuko, so finally putting to bed any of the like assumptions from fans that Dante Bosco would be in the movie. That's not the case. It's Steven Yeun. Studio Mir has joined the production to assist on the animation, though it is somewhat unclear again when it comes to how you read the delay. Is this an emergency, like we need another studio to make this happen, or is this just, this is pretty normal territory for a big production like this to just, hey, if a studio is free and wants to help out, you know, they can come on board. Especially Studio Mir having a tie to the franchise, of course, it makes sense to have them help out on a few kind of moments. We'll see how exactly that goes. It's obviously that debate over, like, you know, is the production on this movie, like, ultimately behind the scenes a bit of a disaster, or is it just having the usual problems that most big productions end up actually having? I'm not entirely sure which is actually the case, ultimately. The other thing, and it's probably the most well-known thing maybe for the year for the movie, is that, of course, we got the official logo reveal, finally. The Legend of Aang: The Last Airbender is the title, though it looks like as of more recent months, they've maybe switched the logo to the second one you can see here, which drops the, and it's now just Legend of Aang: The Last Airbender. This was revealed like by a Chinese film conference kind of thing. Not super officially revealed, not made super public, but looks to be the case. But now, because of more recent information we're going to get into, it looks like the title is still just a working title. And I don't know if that's just a case of, because what they said was that The Legend of Aang: The Last Airbender, so the first one, is a working title. So are they just still building up to, like, do we just want to drop the, or are we changing it again? Because it's not going to have a theatrical release anymore, so are we allowed to do different stuff? Can we use Avatar in the title now that it's not getting the same type of release as the kind of Blue People franchise? I don't know. But yeah, the recent news, literally from just a few days ago, that they are switching the Aang movie from having a theatrical release to instead having a Paramount Plus streaming premiere in fall 2026. So yes, the October 9th date has basically been dropped, though I'm assuming when they eventually do announce a date, it will be in or around October anyway, because they're saying it's fall 2026. So it's either going to be slightly earlier or slightly after the date that we already had. It's just now that it is going to have a slightly different method in which we will be getting the launch. Of course, they're going to have a slightly different date. They don't want to feel like they have to lock in the October 9th, even if it's not maybe ideal for the streaming launch. We'll see how it goes. This press release also did feature some other announcements, like some new voice actors being announced, though they didn't say who they're playing, but also a small description for the movie, which we will get into in just a second. So obviously, this is another piece of negative news. We don't get to see this movie in the cinemas. So after all the waiting, the fandom is not even going to get to have our cool experience of getting to see the high-budget animated movie we've waited all these years for in the theaters. Instead, we just get to load up our Paramount Plus and watch it that way. The movie is still coming out, and actually the press release includes Seven Havens in this, and the Paramount Plus, the way they're promoting this is the idea that all new Avatar animated content is coming out on Paramount Plus first. Paramount Plus is the home of new Avatar. That's what they're trying to do. That's the way they're trying to frame this, as just very clearly, if you want to watch the new Avatar stuff, you just got to go on Paramount Plus. There's no weird, complicated ways all the different projects are going to be like released. They're all on here, movie, series, going forward. Built into this is the idea that, like, okay, it feels like, it's a bit of a confidence-destroying move here, taking away the theatrical release, but then it feels like it's partially countered by the idea of, well, the ultimate takeaway from this is that Paramount view Avatar as being a franchise that could draw a lot of people to their streaming platform, and they seem to have a plan to make that happen by actually switching the big movie to also be something there. It's a weird one because like it's not super confidence inspiring that this is their big plan necessarily, but at least it's a plan, and it relates to the fact that there are multiple Avatar projects coming even beyond just the first movie and first series. So it's an odd one. Obviously there's been petitions to try and restore the theatrical release. That might get through to them eventually. There might be some compromise potentially that could happen coming out of this, where it gets maybe a partial theatrical release, where at least it gives people a chance to see it in the cinemas if they want to, but it will still be primarily the digital release. We'll see what happens. It all depends, I think, really going forward on how they actually do the marketing for the movie when they finally get around to doing it. Because I think built into this, the biggest problem is that they made this big announcement and still refused to put out a visual for this movie. Like, imagine how differently this comes across is if there is a teaser image for the movie attached to this as well. Instead, it's the movie that you weirdly refuse to talk about. You've just done this weird business strategy move with that we're not entirely sure what you're really doing with, and you're still being secretive about. Whereas now that it's streaming only, should you not be more open about talking about it? As in, suddenly the movie and the series you can treat the same, and you've talked a bit about the series, you've shown off an image of the series. Why can't you do the same for the movie? This is going to be the big thing as we go forward, because this potentially means that the movie doesn't show up at specific industry events, which are maybe more for theatrical releases. What will they still show it there? I'm not sure. I don't know. There's so much speculation. There's so much like interpretation of business stuff happening at Paramount that it's really hard to know just how bad this is or not for Avatar. It's one of those situations. My ultimate takeaway in all of this goes back to the very simple point. For the last 11 years, we have not had a single Avatar animated project. We are going to, at the very least, get the Aang movie and Seven Havens. That is 2 animated projects that we didn't have over the last 10 years. We are going to get more animated content. It looks like some of the other ones that are in production, we'll probably get to see them as well. Even if things don't go as well, it doesn't impress Paramount as much as we maybe think it should. By the looks of things, we are going to get probably the first 4 or 5 projects, kind of regardless of what happens. It feels like there's enough stuff in production. It's been long enough that like we're going to get at least 4 projects, I think, out of this. And that by itself is just going to be a massive kind of boost for the franchise. Even if the grand dream of like ongoing projects for the next 10, 20 years and like 8 series plan, 5 movies, the theoretical like limits of Avatar Studios happen or don't happen, even if that stuff doesn't happen and we only get these first couple of projects, I still view that as being a positive. That a few years ago, like when the only hope that we had was that like, oh, Mike and Brian have signed on to do a live action version of ATLA. That was the best new project announcement we had back in like 18, 19, 20. We're in a very different spot here, whereas at least like we're going to be getting a lot of new content, and we've had a bunch of years where the publishing stuff has been kind of pretty nicely supported in the background. Is that the franchise is in a better position than it was a few years ago, and it will be bigger when the stuff does come out. It's just how long does it remain bigger is maybe the question of confidence that comes into play here. Is the long-term future past probably like 2029, like I say 2030 onwards for Avatar Studios. Like what are we doing after the first few years? Do the other movies happen in the same way that they happened before? Do they announce a new project that has not already gone into production once stuff starts to get going? They're the kind of questions and doubts that would naturally, I think, come into play. But a lot of it is still very up in the air. Because they've not started marketing yet, we just have no real sense for, well, what's it actually going to be like when we actually do see stuff? Because there's still the chance that, like, Suddenly they start to market this movie, everyone likes what they see, the perception begins to really change, and now Paramount realize they've got like a hit on their hands. They might make some different decisions. Like, we just don't know until we get closer to release, basically. But yeah, let's talk about this description that we got from the press release. So what it says is, Avatar Aang, the world's last airbender, learns of an ancient power that could save his culture from extinction. With the help of his friends, he embarks on a global quest to find it before it falls into the wrong hands and threatens to upend the peace they sacrificed everything to achieve. This is interesting. It finally gives us a sense for what the movie's actually about. For Aang, the main character, the title character for the movie, they're actually telling us to a certain degree what his character arc is here. That Aang, the last airbender, it's in the title, it's in the second bit of the description there. The movie is about him as the last airbender. He wants the airbenders to come back. All of a sudden he is going to encounter this plot from a villain based on some object from the past that can potentially bring back airbenders or something like that, but at a cost. And is that a cost that Aang is willing to kind of pay or let happen, because it would give him the dream in a way that he's always wanted since he kind of returned to the world? That's a really interesting angle and dynamic, in that, you know, going in, sort of the decision that I guess he's going to have to make here of just like, no. But what are the specifics surrounding this? Who is the villain? What exactly is the object that they're after? What does that object kind of do? How can this bring back airbenders? And then why, in doing so, does this upend the peace of the entire world? What is the pros and cons of this? And, you know, at the very least, it means a cool plot for Aang. Aang challenged in a very interesting way by the villain. And it also potentially could put him into some interesting dynamics with the rest of the group. They will understand Aang's position of wanting airbenders to come back, but they would also be slightly disconnected from that approach as well. That's interesting. It creates a lot of really interesting ideas, and all of a sudden, the movie goes from us not really knowing all that much about it to there at least is some straight away super interesting ideas to come into play immediately. That's cool. That's interesting. And it's that contrast of just that, like, imagine how that would have went if we learned at maybe New York Comic Con, that description, and we had like an image. How differently the year would be shaped just by better planning and presenting of information. Instead, this description has got lost because the only stuff that the fans want to talk about is, of course, the loss of the theatrical. Understandably so, because it's the way in which we will experience this movie. They made a major piece of negative news completely outshine the debut of the description for the movie. And there's your communication problems, like, in a nutshell. Moving on to Seven Havens. They were better about this because Paramount were more hands-off, I guess, with this. They were allowed to show off and announce Seven Havens before they really said anything about the Aang movie, which is weird because this is more of a 2027 show. We're expecting this probably, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months, a year after the Aang movie. We don't really know the strategy. There might be a way where it's only a few months afterwards. We just don't know. But either way, as part of the anniversary press release, they did announce this in a text way by giving the description for this show. And then at San Diego Comic-Con, they revealed an image to go with that description. So they actually got this one right. No extra information at New York Comic-Con, but New York Comic-Con, it has to be said, was a disaster this year. It was just bad. New York Comic-Con was the perfect example of the delay impacting the year to such an extent that they just didn't have a clue what to do. I still think it's bad, even factoring in that the delay impacted them. But, like, no one knew what to do at New York Comic Con, and it was bad. But yes, Seven Havens, looking super interesting to me. I think it's a super thought-provoking concept. I think the visual looks interesting and got people talking. It's very clearly Avatar still, but they're doing some big, bold things with this in terms of what happened at the end of the Korra era. It's purposefully a mystery-based show that they're asking you to ask all of these big questions about, because built into the show, I guess, will be the answers to them. It's not just that they've made some reactionary decisions. It's like, no. They're purposefully leading you to ask these questions. What did or didn't Korra do? What's the deal with Pavi? Why is she missing a leg? What's the deal with them being twins and their kind of weird past? What has happened to the world? What locations are still around in the way we know them to be? Why are the Seven Havens Seven Havens? How are they protected from when everywhere else isn't? Who caused this? Who's the villain in the show? There's a bunch of different questions, but I find it all to be very thought-provoking. I don't immediately look at information surrounding this show and think, this contradicts this will mean this for the franchise. I'm just fascinated as an Avatar fan to see how they do this, because this looks riveting, interesting. And I think it ultimately was a success from the year, is that this show got people talking and thinking, and because there is a visual, it actually feels real to people, unlike the movie. So they actually did a pretty decent job, given that this project is further off than the movie. So again, Avatar Studios' Paramount communication strategy needs to improve. That remains the big thing for next year. In terms of other projects, we just got a little bit on this. There were rumors towards the end of the year more about a water Avatar series, codenamed Red Thunder. That probably will be maybe the second series that comes out from Avatar Studios. A little bit unclear about what's going on, because it was mostly just casting information where it doesn't really use super clear Avatar wording, so we know what's happening here. But it likely is either some speculation it's a Karuk series. I think I lean more to probably just it's a water Avatar series set in the past to flesh out the timeline, I would guess a little bit more, which I think is what they need to do. Whereas they can leave Karuk's story to be told in the novels. And then earlier on in the year, we did get a potential Avatar Studios project lineup, highlighting, of course, the 3 movies, which now are going to be streaming stuff, so obviously stuff has changed. But the idea that there are at least 2 series on the schedule, and various other bits of marketing information throughout the year have highlighted 2 series, 3 series. We know the plan from Avatar Studios is multiple series, spin-offs, all this sort of stuff as we go through the year, video game content, and so on. And especially if you do, I think, look at the press release from a few days ago with a little bit more of an open mind. It's said there in that basically the idea of ongoing Avatar Studios content on Paramount Plus, beyond just the obvious 2 that have been announced. Of course, they talk specifically about the Aang movie and Seven Havens, but built into that is also that future content as well is happening and will be on here as well. And so that relates to this as well. So then we move into Netflix Avatar. So not much to say about it this year, because ultimately we just got some casting reveals, and then of course the very recent teaser trailer to sort of kickstart the marketing, which is more going to happen early next year. It's releasing in 2026, probably early 2026. We don't really know for sure right now, but the idea should be that I think we'll have this within the first half of the year, and we'll see how it goes. What's interesting is that there definitely is still an interest in this show. Season 1 did enough, of course, to get them confirmed for Season 2 and 3, and clearly it's the same effect on fans. Fans are interested enough to check out Season 2, to see how Toph is done, to see how the Bossing Say arc is done, and everything else. We don't know how well they've responded to feedback, how well they'll have done this adaptation. We have to wait and see the episodes, because we know one of our big learnings from Season 1 should definitely be that they can market this show well, but it's not maybe super representative of what the show is on a more minute-to-minute basis. So I'm excited to see how this goes, especially if it goes early-ish in the year. That could be quite helpful for next year. But ultimately this year, Netflix Avatar didn't play too big of a role ultimately. So let's talk about Avatar Legends Realms Collide. Unfortunately, this is one of these things where it's a somewhat forgettable part of the year. The game is still going. I think it has a community that still plays it, but I think most people who tried this game immediately bounced off it. That's the impression I got from the first couple of weeks of the game kind of being out, is just that a lot of people tried it, realized, yeah, this is not it, and completely moved on and are likely never to come back to play the game again. It's just not for, I think, a lot of Avatar fans. I don't think the style of game that this is particularly suits Avatar. The idea of like your heroes leading armies and stuff like that. Tenzin, why is he leading 60,000 airbenders? That's a bit silly. Sure, like it's cool to see like the models and the animations they have for Korra, but you only see these on this literal menu here. Otherwise, like the use of Korra in this game is extremely minimal. The game has a story mode, but it's been updated once very early on since the game came out, and it has not been updated since. And I don't know when there is going to be more. This is where the communication of this game has failed quite heavily, is that, yeah, we're still waiting on that. We still don't have novel characters in the game. Now, admittedly, they're finally getting around, like Rongi has been announced, but we don't know when exactly Rongi's coming. I think they have plans for other novel characters, but like they've not been super clear on what the schedule is. I also don't think they make a huge deal out of when new characters get added, because if you look at the list, basically all the characters that they've added in recent times are all the same kind of rarity. Like there's no like easy to get characters. It's just a new character is in the game and you will get them in the way you get most high level characters, and typically you kind of have to put money in unless you're playing a lot. And it is frustrating. I don't think the game is particularly like amazing just free to play. It's definitely possible, but you have to put a lot of time in. I've not really checked in with it much, especially in recent months. I tried for the first month or two to be pretty regular, but just, yeah, the game's not for me. I'm not doing a lot of stuff in the game that feels like Avatar. It's just a game that feels like a bunch of kind of chores, and there's no real gameplay, I think, is the other thing. Like if we go out into the field and kind of show you what the kind of gameplay actually kind of is, you know, we'll do a battle here, we'll attack, create a troop, let's swap Suki out for Korra, so we have some waterbenders in here, and we'll march. And what are we doing here? Oh look, there's our squad, we're marching over, and we're going to attack the Shattered Skulls here. And note that this is effectively how the game works when you're attacking like other players PvP, if that's kind of what you're doing. It's just that there's more armies and stuff like that. But this is the gameplay. Like, look, there's animations happening here, but there's not a lot that's particularly interesting here. If you know what all the abilities do, you have a little bit of a better sense for what those numbers mean, what all the plus ups do, but it's all happening so quickly, and it's mostly all decided from the second the battle starts. There's no turning it around really or anything like that. It's just, okay, I guess that's how it is. So yeah, it's just an unfortunate kind of one here with this, where I think the idea of Avatar having an ongoing mobile game that's active is cool, but I think this one has not really captured the interest of a lot of Avatar fans. It's obviously doing well enough to continue, but you know, it's a case of like what could have been. I think Avatar Generations could have been something interesting, but it launched kind of, I suppose, feature incomplete and never really got to that point. This game launched relatively feature complete. It's just that the core gameplay is not very interesting at all. So that's the kind of frustrating part with Avatar Legends Realms Collide, is just, yeah, maybe we'll get better games going forward, but I don't think this had as much of an impact on the year as it could have, because I think there was interest. I know from like numbers for videos on my channel in the lead up and the very early part of this year, there was real interest in this game, but yeah, that interest fell off drastically very, very early on. And that is my memory of this game in the early part of the year. And since then, I've not really seen people talk about it much. So let's move into publishing. And of course, we'll start with Dark Horse Comics. And we had a really interesting year for Dark Horse, where basically all their stuff that they released this year pretty much came out in the first half of the year. And then they didn't really have a lot to say in the second half of the year, and it just felt like it was a struggle for them to actually announce what's coming up next. So, Mystery of Pension Island, Ashes of the Academy, and the Free Comic Book Day book Ramen Rumble were the main comic releases for the year. And this is the thing here. The two main books we got this year were good. Like, Mystery of Pension Island is a good Korra one-shot comic. It's a good start to that series. The art is incredible. Sure, they probably could have made this into something more if they had the capacity to do kind of bigger series and stuff like that, but it's still pretty good. I think it's difficult to say that this was a bad comic. The main thing with Korra one-shots is just that they take so long to come out that there's no sense of momentum, but that's a separate problem. That's not a reflection on the individual book and its own quality. Ashes of the Academy, in my mind, is the best ATLA one-shot, and I think most agree that it's right up there with the best. Anything that has sort of like Azula, Zuko focus always seems to get the fans' attention, and definitely of recent comics, this felt like one that had much more of an interest than a lot of other ones. The views on my videos discussing this are way above a lot of recent comics. So people overall, I think, really liked Ashes of the Academy, and I did too. Really nice book and kind of confidence inspiring for like the future with like the return of Ki and stuff like that. Ramen Rumble, sure, not a great story. Why on earth did they decide to do a story about Samurai Appa and Ronin Momo? I don't know, but the art was very good, and at the very least they've immediately taken this creative team and given them a new comic miniseries for next year. So that is a positive, even if there's not much to say about the story here. Next, Beasts of the Four Nations actually came out this year. We've been talking about this for years. What's happened to this book? Where is it? The mystery of Beasts of the Four Nations. And surprise, they re-announced it this year. It released this year. The deluxe set is finally complete. But unfortunately, this book didn't live up to the hype. It is a fine book. Like, to be clear, it is still good. It's just that I think the book should have been absolutely fantastic. This should have been the easiest, like 9, 10 out of 10 book that Dark Horse ever released. But they made some really questionable, baffling creative choices surrounding the text, deciding to have Aang be the main narrator here, and it just meant that this book really did not have a lot of new stuff to say about the animals. The text is just really forgettable, like the whole way through, to the point where I had multiple people ask me in the release window for this book, hey, is there any new interesting details about the animals in this book? Just like tell me a few things. And I'm like, well, you see, otter penguin racing is a thing we kind of got briefly told about. And then I didn't have a follow-up. I literally did not have a secondary fact of note about this book. That is how frustrating the text in this book is. And it just feels like they made some decisions in a vacuum and never really considered what fans would want out of this. And it just, to me, didn't really come together on that text front. The art throughout is fantastic, especially the kind of full page and double page spreads that are like full color are absolutely incredible. Some of the best art we've ever seen from like anything basically for Avatar. Slight negative point on the art for me would be that I do think for such an expensive book that we've waited so long for, I think there's a little bit too much of a focus on black and white art. When I think much more of the art should have been in color. I don't mind a few pieces of art being that sort of sketch style, but I think they did it a little bit too much, that it impacted the kind of visual spectacle overall of the book. And that's just something for me that I feel pretty strongly about. The other point I would make on that is also from an animal information perspective. The color of animals is often a pretty important thing, especially for certain animals. So when you take away the color from the drawings, you take away a bit of information surrounding different colorings of different animals and stuff like that. And that was also a little bit of a frustration. So again, to be clear, the book is still good. I'd still ultimately recommend it to people. It's just, I think we all expected this to be like the easiest book in the world to recommend, where actually you have to give the caveat of like, don't expect the text to be particularly interesting, but at least it's a good art book. So That's that. We'll move into Abrams Books, and they had a very interesting year this year because it was the first year for them where they had 2 novel releases. We saw the start of a brand new novel series, the Avatar Legends series, starting with City of Echoes about Jin. And then we also got Chronicles of the Avatar Book 6, The Awakening of Roku. So as I'm recording this, the book is technically not out yet. I have read it, and I will be starting my coverage very, very soon. And to be clear, both books are good. I like City of Echoes. I like The Awakening of Roku. Things are ultimately going good for Abrams. And they have a pretty consistent thing that they can do now going forward because their marketing plan is for 2 books a year going forward. Continuing Avatar Legends, continuing Chronicles of the Avatar. They look like they're in a pretty nice spot overall. The only thing that I think they need to do to improve is to just be better about communicating throughout the whole year. It did feel like they just kind of left Awakening of Roku kind of out to die on its own at the end of the year by just not communicating particularly effectively about it over the course of the year. I would say, broadly speaking, about publishing overall, I think they leave a little bit too much up to just standard publishing marketing, when I think more specifically they should be doing more specific Avatar franchise marketing. I do think the official Avatar social media, official YouTube, should be doing more to promote and highlight these books, do kind of creator interviews through that kind of side of things, rather than I think all of that stuff coming through very much the kind of publishing industry. I'd like to see more fandom kind of focus, like specific Avatar promotion of these books. And Awakening feels like it really has not been given too much of a chance to shine overall. And I don't know if that's just that it's their first time having a really late December release and just the timing isn't great for a lot of that stuff. So hopefully going forward they sort that out, and maybe if the plan going forward is for Chronicles to be a December release, they can maybe have it be earlier in December. Just that would, I think, make it better for everyone across the board, like a really early December release. Still creates separation between the 2 books in the year, but allows it to just be a little bit better. And then similarly, just like, I think they could have just communicated better about their plans in the year. That like, hey, we are putting City of Echoes in the place of the usual Chronicles of the Avatar release. Just say that. Say pretty clearly, this is what we're doing to try and promote the new book, and we will still release Chronicles of the Avatar. We're just pushing it into a new release window, and that's the plan. Instead, we're left to assume that that's the plan, and just like a lot of Avatar things, I think the communication just could be a bit stronger. That's my main thing with Abrams. Otherwise, they remain super solid with what they do. Some of the biggest chunks of content we get in the year, and now we have 2 books. Great. We also got Bending Academy as another book from Penguin Random House, and I think this is a really fun, really kind of unique novel addition to the publishing lineup. It's set in the Zito era, which makes it interesting by itself. It is about a bunch of completely new, very young characters. It's about a firebending tournament, but it's nice. It's solid. It's not maybe going to blow you away. It's quite introductory, but I think it has the potential to go places as the series progresses, because I think the idea, realistically, is that there should be quite a few volumes of this as we go forward, going into different bending academies, because the plan is for like a worldwide bending tournament that should bring other elements into play, not just fire. So yeah, I think it's a good start. The only thing with them is, again, a kind of communication thing of, I think they could be better about announcing like how many books are in each series, and like when are we expecting the next one. We still don't have like a solicitation for book 2. This feels like the sort of book that shouldn't have a giant gap between releases. This should be like at least 2 a year. If they somehow get this to only like 1 a year, that's a bit of a weird choice in my mind. So they need to get going on this. That's the only thing I would say about this. In addition to, you got to have a digital release for this. I think in terms of trying to create popularity surrounding this, the fact that this is a physical only book is kind of crazy, I think, in 2025. Like, I get it, there's a lot of pictures in it and stuff like that, but no, you need to have a proper digital release for this. It's clear, I think a bunch of more people would have read this book if it had had a digital release. So just to be clear about that. Next, Voyage of the Unity, basically the Magpie Games section, though Magpie didn't really have much to say themselves this year. They went just completely radio silent. Like, I get it. They're a small company, and they're still basically involved in Voyage of the Unity, but Voyage of the Unity is a Beetle and Grimm thing, fundamentally, as far as we're aware. So we got the Kickstarter for Voyage of the Unity this year. It was a complete success, ultimately, in terms of the money that they made. It is still a while off, though. It is scheduled for September 2026, and that's assuming no delays happen before we get there. And there typically are at least some delays with Kickstarters, especially for physical content like this. It really highlights the gap since the last RPG content. Like, by the time this comes out, it is going to be like, what, over 2 full years between releases? That's weird. That's not good enough, I don't think, given the timing of like what we're about to start Avatar Studios. I don't know what the plan is. They need to start communicating a bit better. Magpie, more so than Beetle and Grimm. I would say they've handled so far the early communication on the campaign pretty well, given that, like, I guess production wise, they're still somewhat in the early planning stages, and it'll be more when physical stuff is actually being made where they need to be a bit more talkative, and they're not quite there yet. Otherwise, yeah, they've shown us quite a few pieces of art, which is kind of nice. And the only real frustrations I would have with this are just during the campaign, there was some weird stuff, like when they put up the preview for the campaign and then they changed a bunch of stuff when they actually launched it, and they took away a bunch of value from certain tiers. That was really weird. That was really frustrating. And of course, I have to mention it because I thought it was just so funny. The constant dancing around of the question quite a few people had, which is, why is there no hardcover option? Why was this never mentioned at all during the campaign? The possibility to get the core content of Voyage of the Unity as a hardcover, like all the other RPG releases. Why are you obsessed with making them booklets? And what's weird is that they answered this on like Reddit prior to the campaign, as like it's like a licensing thing. Apparently they're not allowed to do hardcovers. But then during the campaign, they responded to a bunch of people answering this question, and they never said it was a licensing issue. They said it was basically a personal preference thing. They prefer booklets, and it's just so weird that the whole idea here is that they're doing this fancy premium edition, yet the least premium thing about it is the core content, which is just booklets, not a hardcover at all. They haven't really handled the response to that question particularly well, for whatever reason, whether it be that they don't want to throw kind of licensing problems under the bus as being the problem, or they realize they maybe made a bit of a mistake not trying to get a hardcover thing. It's just a bit frustrating that this is now going to be this completely separate type of release than all the other stuff, even though it's original content. And it looks interesting. Voyage of the Unity, Roku era stuff. I'm excited to see what the stories when we get it, ultimately. With the other crowdfunding campaign game, Journey of Aang board game, of course the crowdfunding campaign for this was the end of 2024, so we actually had a full year of kind of waiting for updates. I would say they had pretty weak communication over the course of the year. They've been somewhat heavily delayed in that we were meant to have the game this year. And now they're on track for a March-April 2026 release, assuming nothing else goes wrong. And I get it. They seem to have had delays in production issues that have meant that they can't overly post many updates about that stuff. My problem was more that they also, I think, just have, like, what is the underlying content of the game? Like, they have characters to show off, stuff like that. Just like what the rules text, so we can kind of prepare a little bit for it. And they're not really going into that. They posted a few updates going over, like, hey, here's Kyoshi, here's some of the Earth characters. But then never followed that up with, like, here are the air characters, here are the fire characters, here are the water characters. And there is just that sense of, like, why is it so difficult for you to just post somewhat regularly with some updates? I don't necessarily need to know logistical updates every single, like, week or month. I get it that they can maybe only happen every so often, but you've got a lot of other content that you could be posting about that you're not, just to kind of show signs of life in the campaign. I'm still excited for the game because it is honestly, it plays pretty well from the preview version that I was given, and I am excited for the final version. It's just communication, be better overall. So there's that. Next, we'll go into merchandise. So we finally got what looks to be a proper ongoing toy line for Avatar through Jazwares. Wave 1 released this year with plushes, various sizes of figures, kind of figurines, including what I think is very clearly the best attempt so far at highly articulated figures with the Collector Aang and Collector Zuko. And the only thing that I feel is holding back the line is poor communication. How many times have I said that in this video? When exactly did Wave 1 officially release? Jazwares, I don't think, really communicated very well about that. When's Wave 2? Because Wave 1's been out a little bit now. When is Wave 2 coming? What figures are in Wave 2? Where do we go to find out the announcements for the next waves? I don't know. You know, they never really answered the question of like, are we going to get Korra in here? You know, for 100% for sure. Like, are we? I think we are, but are we doing movie stuff? Like, are you on for Seven Havens? I think that is the plan, because they have like Avatar Legends packaging, and they wouldn't have Avatar Legends as being kind of what the toy line is if they were only doing ATLA. So they just need better communication. I hope that some of the poor communication here is just the, you know, they had to be slightly delayed because of the Aang movie delay, and when things pick up, they'll pick up as well. Because, like, you know, they have Squishmallows now coming out as well next year. So they will have decent merchandise overall. And now the question remains going forward is just like, I think the stuff is good. They just need that continuity of getting multiple waves out, getting to the right characters, not being excessive when it comes to redoing characters over and over again. In that, like, I keep saying it every time we talk about this stuff, but it's almost what I like to call the main Ty Lee test. We have never had actual action figures of main Ty Lee. We've always stopped lines almost like right before we got there, to the point where only like Funko's maybe one of the only figurine lines that's even got to main Ty Lee. When are we going to get to them? Will Korra be included? That's a big thing. That's a really big thing. First ever Korra figure would be amazing. So it's just one of those things where like there's a lot of hope in this line if they make the right choices going forward. The quality seems pretty good. It's now just on the communication and like the distribution basically going forward. But this is a really nice thing to have for this year and ongoing. And if they can get the movie line released, Seven Havens stuff released in the stores when this stuff is airing, I think we're going to be in a pretty good spot. Because we might finally have a merchandise line that is timed correctly, that gets stuff out at the right time. I just hope that this doesn't go off the walls before we properly get going, because of like the delay that we got this year. So that's that. Next, Avatar Magic the Gathering. For me, the merchandise highlight of the year, because this fits everything. We get to see so much new art. I love trading card games. Magic is a really good game that I like. So Avatar Magic the Gathering was incredible. So yeah, I love the products, love collecting the cards. Fantastic. I like playing with these cards as well. But also, good communication surrounding this at basically all times. This was so refreshing to see in the year. If you followed Avatar Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast just getting the information out there effectively about these are the products. Look at all these official articles we have about this. And even though it's a somewhat complicated collection with all the alternate arts and different sets and different products that have different cards that are unique to them, the information is somewhat easy to find and is out there. And they did the card reveals well, and they seem to almost get the official Avatar social media stuff going as well, when it feels like a lot of the publishers can't get like the official Avatar channels to post effectively about some of this stuff as well. So it's just like, this is how you promote Avatar merchandise, is by doing it like this. And I hope that potentially Avatar takes a little bit of the playbook from Avatar Magic the Gathering in terms of just communicate better about this stuff, because they did a good job at like just getting the news out there. I think a lot of people this year like maybe thought about Avatar for like the first time in a long time because of Avatar Magic the Gathering, not because of any Avatar specific news that's coming out because of like publishing or weird movie news that most people don't know about, maybe even the Seven Havens thing. You could have missed all of that, but you probably know that Avatar Magic the Gathering came out this year. That's the difference in kind of communication quality level between these things. So I think for people who maybe aren't really into Magic the Gathering, I think some people almost underestimate how huge of a collaboration this actually is. And especially because I think the Magic the Gathering fandom itself was fully prepared to rip this set to shreds if it wasn't good enough. Because there's been major issues in recent times with the reception to some of these IP-based sets, these Universes Beyond sets. The previous Spider-Man set was not received well at all, and we were up next. Avatar was up next following Spider-Man, but they got it right because the set design was good, the card design was good. You can tell everyone involved in the process cared, including Avatar Studios, and they made it really, really good. I am super excited. The stuff I have already, I'm excited to kind of gradually over the coming months finish my collection, picking up some of the more expensive cards. The only problems that I would have with Avatar Magic the Gathering are two problems. One, I think that the secret layers were a little bit meh. They were not quite as exciting as basically the rest of the stuff. It felt like it was sort of a little bit thrown together. There's some nice stuff in there, but some of it just is a little bit like, okay, fine. I want it for my collection, but like I'm not like as enthused about this as other stuff. The bigger problem, I would say, is just the thing missing from the product lineup was definitely some sort of a more pre-constructed deck product. I understand that they probably didn't do this primarily because they did Avatar Jumpstart, which made the complete basic beginner intro stuff very well for the set with the beginner box and Avatar Jumpstart. And like sealed and draft was relatively easy to get into through Avatar, especially with Magic Arena. But the set doesn't really have much of an on-ramp for like you want to get into building a standard deck with Avatar. You want to build especially a commander deck for Avatar. Like the commander bundle is commander related, but it's not really. And that's where, yeah, the only thing that probably would have solved that issue is if they had actually had commander decks or even just 60 card pre-constructed decks to give people a little bit of guidance when it comes to like deck building for that 100 card singleton format in commander, or going up to like you actually have access to 4 copies of every card in like standard and stuff like that. That's the only problem that I would say was missing, is just that amazing on-ramp to the beginner level of Magic, but then the next level is just like whatever. But overall, a really fantastic big merchandise collaboration in the year that I absolutely loved. And then a few other things I think that are just worth mentioning. One, the Book to Earth soundtrack released digitally and on vinyl this year. I think it's fair to say I don't think it had as much of an impact as the Book 1 Water soundtrack, just because I think we've had the concert for a while now. We've all become a little bit more accustomed to kind of focusing on the music. I don't think the fact that there was like a 2-year gap between Book 1 and 2 helped. I think everyone was fully expecting maybe a year gap between it, not 2 years. And they never set the expectations, I think, accordingly for that. So I think a lot of people just forgot, basically. And like a lot of Avatar stuff, they stopped the momentum completely in its tracks. Hopefully they can get the Book 3 soundtrack out next year, so it's not as big of a gap, because we still need to get the Korra soundtracks out there, the Avatar soundtrack, the Seven Havens soundtrack out, now that they seem to be a bit more soundtrack focused. So it was still cool, but yeah, communication, I think, surrounding the announcement of this one wasn't great. They tried to do a kind of news debut through the podcast, and this was an example of that not quite working, because they revealed it originally through the audio podcast, and then the visual of the actual cover for the soundtrack like was only on the video version of the podcast, and then that went up much later, and it's just they didn't handle this news announcement super well initially. Then the first 3 Chibi Minis was unfortunately somewhat forgettable part of the year. They announced these, one of the few announcements at New York Comic Con. They only released 3 of these. Again, communication was disastrously bad about these. They just went up. There was, we got into like an assumed 1 a week release schedule, but I'm pretty sure the 3 of them released over the course of like 4 weeks. Like there was a gap week in between one of them, and then we have no clue when they're coming back. Even though we know that there's 10 of these from the anniversary press release. They're fine, but there's not much to them. Maybe the later ones will be a little bit more interesting than the very early series ones, which these first 3 were. But yeah, they again just failed to communicate very strongly about these, mostly official Avatar social media stuff, really letting us down there. The other New York Comic Con announcement was, of course, the kind of return of Avatar Legends, the fighting game, which we had heard about. It was cancelled. It's now been kind of revived, basically. And everything seems to be going pretty well with this so far. It seems to be received quite well. Had an alpha test. It's going to have more alpha tests, beta tests going forward, and is planned for a summer 2026 release date. Again, I don't think the fighting game is going to be the kind of everything video game that we need, but it's going to be, I think, a nice thing to have, especially if they can get the details surrounding the story content or single player content in the game pretty well, and that gets received well. I think this could be a really nice game project to have, the first kind of big Avatar game in a while. But that brings us then into the kind of final sections of the video. So as usual with these year in reviews, I give a kind of channel update. Like, how was the year for the channel? As ever with the channel, success growth depends on how much big stuff is happening. So outside of a few pieces of kind of big news, it felt like a slow year for the channel and kind of a slow year for Avatar. You can tell everything was delayed because it also felt like the growth of the channel was kind of delayed. And the Seven Havens reveal, Magic the Gathering, and the release of Ashes of the Academy. That is what my YouTube analytics numbers tell me were the kind of stuff of interest for Avatar this year. And to get into a little bit more into the weeds, yes, some of my best videos this year are the stuff covering the Seven Havens information. Yes, covering a bunch of the Magic the Gathering stuff as well, because I did quite heavy coverage on that. And maybe kind of surprising, but Ashes of the Academy pulled in basically like double the numbers Mystery of Pension Island did, like double the numbers of Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, the previous Avatar comic. Like, huge interest in this compared to more recent stuff, given that my channel is quite kind of comic focused more than a lot of other Avatar channels. That was actually quite notable. That, like, yeah, I was really pleased with how the numbers did on Ashes of the Academy and where the interest level was. Like, people want more notable comics, and we kind of got one here, but when's the next one? That's really the question that I take from that. I did what I could to be as active as possible with kind of live streams when possible and stuff like that, making quality videos, regular videos. But in 2025, I gained about 450 subscribers. This was less than half of my growth in 2024. Obviously, the big thing we didn't have this year that we had last year was a season of Netflix Avatar. So obviously we were missing that big thing. A lot of the big Avatar pieces of news were very small, brief, very early pieces of information. So that kind of chunk of content where we're discussing episodes, discussing trailers, we didn't have that this time out. Also, I would factor in a little bit of, I don't think City of Echoes quite had the pull or draw of Chronicles of the Avatar. That because of the late release of Awakening of Roku, I don't have like my coverage up for that, of course, yet. I can't. Like, no one could have. And I think there is going to be a kind of somewhat noticeable difference in terms of like where the interest level is in terms of in-depth coverage of the Avatar Legends series versus Chronicles. That is a small factor, but I would say most of that kind of half drop in terms of growth is probably just due to the lack of a major big project this year compared to last year. So, 2025, a frustrating year. There is definitely a lot of good stuff. That has to be said. But this was the year we expected the focus to be on the big stuff for the first time, and because of the delay, the loss of the theatrical release, negative news is the defining news from those kind of bigger projects, from the big pieces of news. Huge disappointment on the Aang movie information front. Seven Havens surprised us with its reveals happening quite early, but once again a year where it kind of was mostly all on the publishing to keep things going. We didn't expect that to be the case, but it had to be. And while we did get some good publishing stuff this year, 2 novels, some good comics, there was also some weird delays surrounding the comics, especially in terms of like announcements for next year and stuff like that. There's some weirdness going on, even though it does look like we're about to ramp up a bit more. But yeah, publishing definitely felt weird. The delay definitely impacted more than just the movie itself. On the merchandise front, I think this is a positive from the year, is that usually the merch is very much a like, oh, and we got some merch. Nothing really else to say about it. But this year, actually, it's worth commenting on the idea of big Avatar toy line in Jazwares that maybe this year didn't have a huge impact, but probably will be more of note while the new projects are coming out into the future. But it's out now. But also Avatar Magic the Gathering. Big merchandise releases for the year, like huge, that actually kind of had impact and kind of drew people in. And that, like I said, I think Avatar Magic the Gathering probably did a better job this year about making people remember Avatar than nearly anything else related to the anniversary this year. So that's somewhat quite telling. But it also was notable that outside of those two, I don't think there really was much merchandise stuff like at all in the year, because Diamond Select Toys shut down, and most of the other stuff was like, hey, 1 or 2 high-end statues came out, and that's really about it. So yeah, not a great year on the big news front, but maybe a sign that we're beginning to get going. But certainly, like I said in my preview for 2026 video, it has to be 2026. We can't have more delays. We can't kind of have next year go the same way that this year went, where, oh, sorry, accidental kind of delay, everything's going to get pushed again. No. We got to go. We have to do this. 2026 is very much it's now or never. Like, you are going to lose the confidence of everyone if you don't go now. You get the benefit, I think, for now, because this felt like the first time you had a real like, oh, actually, we really do need to delay this. We need more time just to make this at the quality level we expect it to be. This is not just a speculative release date, but, you know, we actually, to hit a proper release date, we need more time. We can't do this again. You just got to get going, and it's now very much on them. It's on Paramount, it's on Avatar Studios to actually communicate better across the board. And hopefully the delay, you know, we will have maybe a slowish start to the year, but then with Netflix Avatar and build up to the animated project, we should have a better year next year. Again, supported with publishing, but the hope is, I think, that the publishing isn't the be-all end-all of the year like it kind of has been. It is nice to be in a situation again where the publishing can be the extra rather than everything. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, that has been the video. Thanks for watching. And I'll end with a big thank you to my channel members. At the Light Spirit tier, we have Tab U, Gersharon Man, Quintinius, Alexander Forte, Gustavo Andrade, Alex Branch, Irvin Mann. And at the higher Avatar tier, we have Brit in Toyland, Fishik, Callum, Persian Lagoon, Therian, Beryl Mulder, Martin Monterosa, Chaz, Bate, and Nicholas Protopapas. Thank you very much for your support. But yes, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.